Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Nerd Mode On, and welcome to episode 6 of Sniper Sundays, a video series where I'll be using anything from DMRs to bolt-action sniper rifles and just kind of going over some information in relation to the item similar to a weapon review. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode, shall we? So for today's episode, we're going to be looking at the L96A1. Now, of course, starting off with some of the generic information, this weapon performs at 48 rounds per minute when it comes down to the rate of fire, which is pretty equivalent to most of the other ones. It's a little higher than some and a little lower than others, but overall pretty consistent, and you're not going to see a whole lot of deviation, especially in those circumstances. Now, this weapon is going to be clocking in at 550 meters a second for the velocity, which again is on par with the other ones, a little faster than others, a little less than others, but on average it's a pretty average weapon, especially when it comes down to the velocity, and you're not going to have to account too much when it comes down to bullet travel time and distance especially. Now, of course, transitioning into the more juicy information when it comes down to the overall weapon performance, you guys will notice that the damage model is pretty consistent with a lot of the other bolt-action sniper rifles. You usually don't see a whole lot of deviation there, considering that they are hard-hitting weapons, but most of the time they're not going to deviate too much, because otherwise one will become too good or vice versa. So you're going to see a lot of steady statistics when it comes down to the main gist of that. But, kind of dissecting right into it, you guys will notice that the weapon is going to be doing 100 damage up until 12.5 meters. Now, of course, after 12.5 meters, the weapon is going to gradually decrease the overall damage that you're going to be able to occupy at those ranges. However, once you hit around 100 meters, your maximum damage will be 59 damage, and anything after 100 meters, you're going to just be doing a steady amount of 59 damage. So it's always in your best interest to line up a headshot, because that way you're guaranteeing yourself that you are going to only need one bullet to drop your enemy foe. In those cases, the overall damage model is going to coincide with the multiplier, and you're going to kill him in one bullet. So with that information discussed, let's talk a little bit about the magazine size as well as the reload speed to give you guys a general idea of how this weapon is going to perform against its competitors. Now, of course, starting off with the magazine size, you guys will notice that the weapon upholds a total of 11 rounds total. Of course, that's 10 round magazine plus one in the chamber. You add both of those together and you get 11 rounds total. Now, with that said, that is pretty consistent with a lot of the other ones. That's pretty identical to some of them, but, it's better than others. You're not going to see a whole lot of deviation there, but 11 rounds total is definitely a lot of damage that you can put down range, and overall, hopefully you guys are very accurate with a sniper, because in those cases, you might be able to get all 11 people, or even more if you get some collaterals along the way. Now, of course, looking at the reload speeds, you guys will notice that the short reload is going to be about 3.6 seconds, and then the long reload is going to take a little bit longer, considering that you have completely diminished all your ammunition, clocking in at 4.65 seconds. So definitely it's always in your best interest to at least have one bullet left in the chamber, because that way you're back on the battlefield and ready to go. But if you happen to run out, it's only going to be about another second. And finally, let's talk a little bit about the overall recoil of the weapon and give you guys a general idea of how much it's going to initially kick when your first shot goes off. Now, of course, this is a bolt-action sniper rifle, so by the time that you rechamber your next round, the recenter rate is already going to be back in the middle of the screen. So you're not going to have to worry too much about that kind of stuff, but I thought I'd give you guys an idea of how much the initial kick is going to impact you. So, of course, for the horizontal side of it, it's going to be zeroed out, and of course, on the vertical side of things, you're going to notice that 0.25 is going to indicate the overall vertical recoil. Now, of course, like I said before, your recenter rate is definitely going to recenter before you have to shoot your next round, so you're not really going to have to ever worry about recoil management when it comes down to a weapon that only has a single fire mode. So overall, that's all the information when it comes down to the statistics of the weapon, when it comes down to how it's going to perform, and its performance against its competitors when it comes down to it. Now, of course, if you guys are interested, I can give you some customization recommendations so that you guys can better equip yourself on the battlefield. So, of course, starting things off in the optics category, this is really going to depend on which kind of optic you've already been using on your other weapons. If you're somebody that commonly uses the 7 or 8 times, or maybe use an ACOG or whatever the case might be, I would highly recommend going with an exact same optic. You don't want to transition to a different one, considering that you have to relearn the entire scope again. If you're somebody that's already become very good with the 8 times, then I would highly recommend continuing to use the 8 times, because it's going to allow you to be far more effective than you would be if you started to use an ACOG or something like that. So definitely using a scope that you're already familiar with is going to make you a lot more effective as a sniper, as well as a lot better player. Of course, looking at the accessories tab, this is really going to depend on what kind of a player you are. If you're a very aggressive player, then I would of course recommend a laser sight, of course, all the way, because it's going to allow you to hip fire a little bit better. It's going to make things a little bit easier if you get caught off guard, and maybe you'll be able to get that lucky no scope that everybody dreams about. But of course, if you're more of a defensive player, you like to sit way back in the hills, maybe 2,000-3,000 meters from the objective, then of course maybe going with something like a variable zoom might be more effective if you're using something like an 8 or 7 times optic. It's going to make it easier for you to see the targets, which in turn makes you a lot more effective than you would be if you were using a scope that probably wasn't fitted for that kind of playstyle. Now, of course, transitioning into the barrel attachments, there's only one real winner when it comes down to it, and that's the flash hider. Everything else makes you far less effective at range and really hampers your ability to be an effective player. So I would recommend using either standard barrel with nothing attached or a flash hider, which in turn has no negative side effects and only positives. So that would be my recommendations for that. And finally, the auxiliary tab. Again, this is really going to depend on how you've already depicted your class and already decided on what kind of a player you are. If you're more of a defensive player, of course, you like to sit up in the hills and maybe patrol an area or whatever the case might be. Of course, going with a bipod is going to make things a little bit more easy for you. It's going to allow you to be a lot more steady, which in turn makes you a better shot. Now, of course, if you're more of an aggressive guy, you like to be right up in front of the enemy opposition. You like to be able to smell them and see what they had for dinner. Of course, being able to use a straight pull is probably going to be the best option for you. It's going to allow you to rechamber around a lot quicker, which in turn doesn't leave your pants down as long as it might be in other circumstances. So, of course, that's what I would recommend in that particular playstyle. But overall, those are my recommendations when it comes down to the L96A1. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I will see you guys next time for the next installation. And until then, guys, this is NMO, and I'm going to be signing out. Peace.